I knew her before I knew her name, and that is where all of it began, with a grief that walked into my hall on a living woman's feet. The winter court of Valeron presented its new maidens on the first hard frost of the season, as it had for 400 years. I sat the black granite throne my grandfather cut from the mountain's heart, and I watched them come one by one down the long aisle between the silver braziers, each daughter of each great pack, each bow measured, each gown a small war of ambition. I had learned to feel nothing at these presentations. A king who lets a court read his face has already lost it. So I sat still, and I felt nothing, and I waited for it to be over. Then the steward called a name I did not know, a healer's daughter, low-born, no pack of consequence behind her, brought in to serve the court's infirmary and stand the presentation only because custom demanded every new servant be seen by the throne. And a woman in plain gray wool stepped into the brazier light, and something in my chest tore open along a seam I did not know I had. It was not desire. I want to be exact, because for a long time I misnamed it, and the misnaming nearly cost me everything a second time. It was grief. It came up out of me the way grief comes for the long dead, sudden, complete, older than reason, and it fixed itself on a woman who was standing before me alive and breathing and entirely unharmed. My wolf did not rise in me the way he rose for danger or for want. He keened. Deep in the dark of my ribs, the beast that had led my armies and never once flinched lifted his head and mourned, low and broken, as though he were standing over a body in the snow. I gripped the arm of the throne so the court would not see my hand shake. She bowed. She did not linger, did not angle for my eye the way the great daughters did. She rose, and for one heartbeat she looked at me, gray eyes, steady, the color of a lake under ice, and across her face went a thing I could not read then and have never forgotten since. Recognition. And under it, so quick I might have imagined it, something that was not fear and was not hope but sat exactly between them, like a woman greeting a debt. Then she stepped aside and was gone into the ranks of the servants, and the next maiden came, and the presentation went on, and I sat there mourning a stranger with my nails cut into stone. Her name was Eloan. I made the steward repeat it twice. That night I dreamed of snow. I have never been a man who dreams. My sleep is the flat black sleep of the soldier, and I wake from it the way I wake from anything at once and ready. But that first night after the presentation I stood in a dream at the winter gate of my own court, the great iron gate that opens onto the pass, and the snow came down in the dark so thick it swallowed the torches, and beyond the bars a figure knelt in the white with her back to me, and I could not reach her. The gate was barred and I had no key, and my hands would not close on the iron, and I called out and no sound came, and the cold took her the way cold takes the abandoned slowly, and then all at once, and I stood on the warm side of my own gate and watched a woman freeze to death 6 feet from me and could do nothing, and I knew with the whole certainty of the dream that I had done this, that I had let it be done, that she had knelt there waiting for me to come, and I had not come. I woke in the dark with my face wet and my chest heaving like a man dragged from a river, and I did not know her name in the dream, but waking I knew it. Eloan. I told myself it was nothing. A king carries the dead of many battles. Sometimes they come back to walk the halls of sleep. I dressed before dawn and went down to the training yard and drove myself against my captains until the cold burned everything out of me, and I did not think of the healer's daughter with the ice-gray eyes, and by mid-morning I had almost convinced myself. Then my grandmother summoned me, and the court began to move, and I saw that Eloan of the infirmary was already 3 steps ahead of all of us. My grandmother is the Dowager Queen Meles, and to understand what happened you must understand her, so I will tell you plainly, and without the softening a grandson owes his blood. She had held Valeron through 2 kings' deaths and my own minority, and she had held it the way you hold a wolf by the throat, with a grip that never once relaxed, because she believed, truly believed, that the instant it did, the pack would turn and tear the crown apart. Everything she did to guard the bloodline and the throne. She was not cruel for the pleasure of it. She was cruel the way winter is cruel, without malice, without mercy, as a simple law of the world. And she had decided, before I was ever grown, that I would wed the daughter of a great pact to bind the North, and that any woman who came between me and that binding was not a rival but a threat to the realm, to be removed as you remove a stone from a horse's hoof, without hatred and without a second thought. That morning she had me to her solar, where the braziers were always kept too high, and she poured the black tea herself, which meant she wanted something. The presentation went well, she said. Lady Sabine of Carth carried herself like a queen already. Did she? You will have noticed her. I noticed the drafts, I said. The East Hall gate wants rehanging before the deep frost. Maylie smiled the way she smiled when a man tried to slip her, which is to say not at all. Alaric, you are 32, the Pax murmur. A king with no chosen mate is a king with a hollow at his center, and every ambitious house in the north can feel the wind through it. Carth would bind the whole eastern range to us. Her father commands 4,000 spears. This is not a matter of the heart. It is a matter of the map. I am aware of the map, grandmother. I drew half of it in blood. Then you know the eastern edge of it is thin. She set down her cup. Take Sabine to the moon feast. Let the court see it. That is all I ask for now. I did not want Sabine of Carth, but I had not wanted any of them, and I had learned long ago that wanting was a luxury a king could not always afford, and I nearly told my grandmother yes, the small yes that begins the long road to a wedding, because it was easier than the argument, and because I could think of no reason to refuse that I could put into words. And then, standing at the solar window while she spoke, I looked down into the lower courtyard and saw the healer's daughter. Eloan was crossing from the infirmary to the herb store with a basket on her hip, and as she came to the well at the courtyard center she stopped, not slowed, stopped, dead, mid-stride, and looked up over her shoulder at the loose stone coping of the well's rim, the way you look at a thing you know is about to fall. And a breath later the coping stone, undercut by frost, sheared off the rim and dropped exactly where her next step would have carried her, and cracked the flagstones where her skull would have been. She had stopped a full second before it fell. She had known. I watched her stand there over the broken stone, not startled, only still, and then she stepped around it and went on to the herb store as though a thing long expected had merely, at last, arrived. Alaric, my grandmother said, you are not listening. No, I said slowly. I am. Give me until the moon feast to consider Carth. She took it for surrender. It was not surrender. It was the first time in my life I had lied to Maylies, and I did it because I had just watched a low-born healer's daughter know the future, and every soldier's instinct I owned had come awake at once. I began to watch her. Tell yourself a king has better uses for his hours. I told myself the same, and I watched her anyway. She was always a half step ahead of the court, and no one saw it but me, because no one else was looking. When the kitchen master, a petty man who hated new servants, ordered her to fetch water from the deep cistern whose ladder was rotten, a task that had crippled a scullery girl the year before, Eloan simply carried a second, sound ladder down before he asked, so that when he sent her, she was already safe. When Lady Sabine's women, marking her as the one thing at court beneath even them, arranged to have the infirmary stores found, short so a servant could be dismissed and made an example, Eloan had already had the steward count and seal the stores 3 days prior, and stood with the tally in her hand when the accusation came, so that it broke against her like water on rock, and the shame rebounded on the accusers. She did not fight the court. She met it a step before it arrived, every time, as though she had walked all these halls before and remembered where the floor gave way. And she avoided me. That was the strangest thing and the thing that gnawed me worst. Every other soul in Vale Run angled toward the throne, a word, a glance, a moment in the king's eye was currency, and they all spent their lives chasing it. Eloan spent hers stepping out of my path. If I came down a gallery, she found a reason to be at its far end. If chance sat us in the same room, she kept her back half turned and her eyes on her work. And when I spoke to her directly, which I did twice, on thin excuses, she answered with a servant's flat courtesy, correct and closed as a shut door, and gave me nothing. It should have insulted me. Instead, it deepened the grief, because there was no hatred in her avoidance and no fear in it either. There was only a careful, deliberate distance, the distance you keep from a fire that has already once burned your house down. The dreams came every night now, always the snow, always the gate, always her kneeling with her back to me and my hands failing on the iron. But now there were other pieces, flashes out of order, a broken thing seen through cracked glass. A ring of gray eyes lifted to mine in a warmer hall in summer, unafraid. My own voice saying words I did not remember saying, stand beside me, her hand in mine. And then, later, because the dream always tilted toward its ending, a scroll pressed into my palm bearing a seal I trusted, and a betrayal written on it in a hand I believed, and the whole court's faces turned to me, waiting, and my own mouth opening to condemn her. I would wake before I heard what I said. Every night I woke before I heard it, and every night I lay in the dark afterward certain of one thing with a certainty that had no source, that in some place, in some time, I had said the words, that I had stood where I sat now and let them take her out to the gate, and that she remembered it and I did not. And that was why she would not look at me, because she was standing before a man who had already killed her once, and she was not going to give him the chance again. I did not believe it. A sane king does not believe he has lived before, has failed before, has a debt to a dead woman who is not dead. But I have led men into places no sane man would go, and I have learned that the thing you refuse to believe and cannot stop knowing is usually the truth arriving before your pride will let it in. So I did the only thing a soldier can do with a truth he cannot yet name. I set a watch on it. I stopped fighting the dream and started reading it, the way you read enemy ground, and I went looking for the woman who held the other half of it. I found her in the herb store on the night the first deep frost sealed the gate, because I had at last stopped letting her step out of my path and had simply gone to where she was. She heard me at the door and did not turn. The infirmary is closed for the night, Your Grace. If someone is hurt, I will come up. No one is hurt, I said. I came to ask you a question, and I will have a true answer, not a servant's one. Her shoulders went still. Then she set down the bundle of dried yarrow she was tying and turned to face me, and for the first time since the presentation she looked at me full, the ice-gray eyes level with mine, and I felt the grief and the pull of her hit me together like two hands closing on my throat. Ask then, she said. How do you know the stone will fall before it falls? I said. How do you count stores 3 days before you are accused of theft? How do you carry a sound ladder to a rotten cistern before you are sent? You are always a step ahead, Eloan. Every trap in this court you meet it before it springs. No one else has seen it. I have seen nothing else for a month. How? I watched her decide whether to lie to me. I watched her weigh it, the low-born woman weighing the king, and I understood, seeing it, exactly how careful a life she had learned to live. Then she chose, and what she chose was not the lie and not the truth, but a third thing, harder than both. You would not believe the answer, she said, and believing it would only hurt you. So let it be enough that I am careful, and let me be careful in peace. I dream of snow, I said. She went white. I had not meant to say it. I had meant to press her, to command her, to be the king in the room. Instead, the thing that had been living under my ribs for a month came up on its own. Every night, I said, the winter gate, a woman kneels in the snow with her back to me, and I cannot reach her, and the cold takes her, and I know, Eloan, the way you know your own name, that I did it, that I let it be done, that she waited for me to come and I did not come. My voice was not the king's voice now, and I do not know her face because she never turns, but I know her name. I have known it since the day you walked into my hall, and I do not understand how a man can grieve a woman he has never lost, unless— Stop, she said. Unless he has lost her, and does not remember, and she does. The herb store was very quiet. The frost ticked against the shutters. She stood with one hand braced on the table as though the floor had moved under her, and when she spoke again her voice was low and even and terrible in its calm. You remember the snow, she said, but not the scroll. There is a scroll, I said, my mouth had gone dry. In the dream, a seal I trust, a betrayal written in a hand I believe, and the court waiting, and I open my mouth and I always wake before I hear what I say. You do not want to hear what you say. She said it without cruelty, which made it worse. I have heard it. I hear it still. So let me spare us both, your grace, and I will not tell you what your own mouth did, and you will let me go on being careful, and neither of us will have to stand in that room again. Tell me who wrote the scroll, I said. No. Eloan. No. And now something broke through the calm, and it was not fear and it was not grief. It was fury, banked so long it came out cold. You want the name so you can make it right, so you can be the good king who catches the plot and saves the servant and sleeps easy again. But you do not get to make it right, Alaric. You do not get to sweep in and fix me because I am not the one who needs fixing. I already saved myself. I have been saving myself from the moment I opened my eyes and found myself alive again on the first morning, because I learned in the snow that no one was coming. Not you, not anyone. So do not ask me to hand you my rescue so you can feel like a man again. I do not need a king. I needed one once, and I knelt at your gate and waited for him, and he did not come. Her chest was heaving. I will not kneel there twice. I have stood in the breach of a broken wall with an army coming through it, and I have never in my life been struck the way that struck me, because I understood all at once and entire that the dream was memory, that it had happened. That in some life the court had told me a lie sealed with a trusted seal, and I had believed it, and I had let them take this woman out to the winter gate, and she had knelt there in the dark believing to the last that I would come, that the man she had given herself to would come, and I had not come, and she had died alone with my name freezing on her lips, and that she had been given, by some mercy or some cruelty of the moon, a second passage through the same days, and that she had spent this whole month not scheming her way up but simply, quietly, surviving me, surviving the court, surviving the gate, refusing to trust the one thing whose failure had killed her. I did not tell her I believed her. I did not tell her I was sorry, because sorry was a coin so far beneath the debt that offering it would have been an insult. I stood in the herb store with the frost ticking and the whole edifice of my certainty in ruins, and I said the only true thing I had. Then I will not ask you to trust me, I said. You are right that I have not earned it. I will not ask you to hand me your rescue. But I am going to find the hand that wrote that scroll, Eloan. Not to save you, you have made it plain you do not need saving. To stop it being written. Because if it is written again and I believe it again, then I am the man from the gate, and I would rather die than be him twice. She looked at me for a long moment, and whatever she saw, I do not know what she saw. It was not enough to make her trust me, but it was enough to make her not turn away. Then look to your grandmother's seal, she said quietly, and say nothing to anyone that I told you so. And she took up her yarrow and turned back to her table, and I understood I was dismissed, by a healer's daughter, and I went. I will not pretend the next weeks were the king moving and the court obeying. They were the hardest work of my reign, and I did most of it in the dark, because the moment my grandmother suspected I had turned my eye toward her, the whole game would change and Eloan would be the first to fall. Look to your grandmother's seal, she had said. I could not believe it, and I could not stop knowing it, which by then I had learned meant it was true. So I did what the dream had never let me do. I stayed in the room. Each night now, when the snow came and the gate stood barred, I made myself not wake. I made myself turn toward the throne instead of the gate. I made myself watch my own hands take the scroll and break the seal, and I read it. I forced my sleeping eyes to read it, and night by night, a little more of it came clear. It was an accusation of treason. It said that Eloan of the infirmary was no healer's daughter but a placed agent of the Karth Pack's rivals, that she had come to Valeron to poison the bloodline, that she had been taken in her own confession. It was sealed with the moon and thorn of the royal house, and it was written in a clerk's careful hand. But at the foot of it, where the witnessing mark should have been, there was a second small device pressed into the wax beside the great seal, half hidden, the kind of private cipher a noble uses to sign a thing they wish acknowledged in secret and denied in public. 3 thorns and a crescent. I knew it. I had seen it 1,000 times on my grandmother's private letters, the mark she pressed beneath her own hand when she wanted a man to know an order came from her, and to be unable to prove it. 3 thorns and a crescent, Maylies. I woke that night and did not weep. I lay in the black and I was colder than the dream had ever made me, because now I understood the whole shape of it. My grandmother had not hated Eloan. My grandmother had looked at a low-born healer's daughter who had taken the king's heart and threatened the Karth binding and therefore, in her arithmetic, the throne, and she had removed the stone from the horse's hoof. She had forged a treason, sealed it with the house's seal so that even I would not doubt it, and pressed her own secret cipher beneath so that whoever did her work would know whom they served. And she had let me believe it, and I had believed it, and a woman had died at my gate. And she was going to do it again, because nothing had changed for Maylies. She did not remember the snow. To her, this was simply the first turn of a wheel she had turned many times before, and Eloan was simply the next stone, and the moon feast was coming, and at the moon feast I was to take Sabine of Karth's hand before the court, and any woman between me and that hand was a threat to be removed. I understood then that I could not simply protect Eloan. If I shielded her, Maylies would only choose another way, and another, patient as winter, and one of them would land. If I confronted Maylies, she would deny it, and I could prove nothing. And a king who accuses the Dowager Queen of forging treason and cannot prove it has handed his crown to every ambitious house in the north. The seal was hers, but the seal was also mine, the royal house's, and she would say a servant or an enemy had stolen its use, and the court, which loved her and feared me, would believe her. There was only one way. The plot had to be sprung and turned. The forgery had to be made in the open, witnessed, and unmasked at the moment it was meant to strike, before the whole court, so that Maylies could not deny it, and I could not be accused of striking down my own grandmother on a whim. It had to be her own trap that took her. And I could not do it, because I did not know when the blow would fall, or how, or through whose hand, and the one person in Valeron who did know, who had lived every hour of it once already, had told me plainly that she would not hand me her rescue so I could feel like a man. So I went back to the herb store, and this time I did not go as the king. I found the seal, I told her, 3 thorns and a crescent beneath the great seal. It is my grandmother's private cipher. Eloan did not look surprised. She had known for a life and a month after all. She only nodded once and went on grinding something in a mortar and said, "So now you know." "Now I know," I said, "and I know I cannot stop it by shielding you because she will only try again through another door. And I know I cannot accuse her because the seal is the house's and she will name a thief and the court will take her word. The only way it ends is if the forgery is made in the light and unmasked in the moment it strikes, her own trap, closing on her, before every witness in the hall." I set my hands flat on her table so she would see they were steady. "And I do not know when it comes or how. You do, you have lived it. And I am not going to command it out of you because you are right, it is yours and I have no claim on it. I am asking, as a man who owes you a debt and cannot pay it, help me spring it back on her so that it can never be written a third time. Not to save you, to end her ability to do it. And then, whatever you decide about me, whether you never speak to me again, will be yours to decide freely, with the gate at your back locked forever against her." She stopped grinding. For a long while she said nothing. The braziers hissed, and when she finally spoke, she did not look up from the mortar. "It comes at the moon feast," she said. "It always comes at the moon feast, because that is where you are to take the Karth hand, and she wants me gone from your eye before you do. A steward's boy, Corin, the young one, the one with the bad leg, she uses him because he is desperate and no one looks at him, will bring the scroll to the high table between the toasts, and give it to the feast marshal, and the feast marshal will read it aloud because that is the law. Any writ of treason laid before the throne at open feast must be read at once. He will read that I am a placed agent. He will read that I have confessed. And the guards will take me. I will already be at the feast, serving because she plants me there on purpose, so the court can watch me taken, and they will take me to the gate and put me out and bar it. And you—" She stopped. "And I believe it," I said quietly, "because it is sealed with my own house's seal, and I have no reason to doubt it, and I do not know to look for 3 thorns and a crescent." "You believe it," she said, and she looked up at last, and her eyes were wet, and she was furious with herself for it. "You look at me across the whole hall while the marshal reads, and you look at me the way you would look at a snake that had slept in your bed, and you say, "Don't," I said. "I told you, I don't want to hear what I said." "You said take her to the gate." She said it anyway, all of it, cold and precise, because I think she needed me to carry it too. 3 words, that is all it took. I had given you everything, and you gave me back 3 words, and they took me out. And I knelt at the iron and I waited, because I could not make myself believe that you would truly let me die out there. Not you, not after everything. I knelt there half the night believing you would come. And you did not come. And when I understood you were not coming, I stopped waiting, and I let the cold have me. And the last thing I knew was that no one was ever going to come for me again. I do not have the words for what it is to be told, in a quiet herb store, exactly how you murdered the woman you love in a life you cannot remember. I will not try to make them. I stood and I took it, and I did not look away, because looking away would have been one more mercy given to myself, and I had given myself enough. "Then here is what we do," I said when I could. "And you will tell me if I have it wrong, because you are the only one who knows the ground." And I laid it out, and she corrected me twice sharply on the timing and on which guards Maylies owned, and I let her. And by the end it was not my plan or hers, but a thing we had made together in the dark, and that, though I did not know to prize it then, was the first thing in either life we had ever built as equals. Here is how it went, on the night of the moon feast, in the great hall of Vale under 1,000 candles, with my grandmother watching from her place at my right hand, and Sabine of Karth seated in the honor place at my left, waiting for the toast that would begin her queenship. I let it all proceed. That was the hardest part, to sit through the feast and do nothing, to let Maylies believe her wheel was turning as it always turned. I did not take Sabine's hand. I found a courteous reason to hold the toast, a word about the deep frost, the pass, the packs of the far north who had not yet arrived, and my grandmother's mouth tightened, but she let it stand, because she meant to solve the Eloan problem before the toast in any case, and my delay served her. Eloan served at the high table. Of course she did. Maylies had placed her there. She moved among us pouring the dark wine, plain gray among all that silk, her eyes down, a servant, invisible, exactly as she was meant to be. But under her apron, against her ribs, she carried a thing we had spent a fortnight preparing, and twice as she passed behind my chair her hand brushed the back of it. Once lightly, the signal we had agreed. He is in place. The boy is here. And I knew the steward's boy Corin had come with the scroll, and I did not turn my head. Between the 3rd toast and the 4th, exactly as she had said, the boy came limping to the high table and gave a sealed scroll to the feast marshal, and spoke a word in his ear, and the marshal's face changed, and he rose. "Your Grace," the marshal said into the hall, and the music died, and 1,000 faces turned. A writ of treason has been laid before the throne. By the law of open feast, I must read it at once. The hall went silent as a held breath. I felt rather than saw my grandmother go very still and very satisfied at my right hand. I felt Sabine of Carth lean forward, scenting a rival's fall. And I felt Aloan, 3 steps behind my chair with a wine jug in her hands, become the stillest thing in that whole vast room. "Read it," I said. And the marshal read it. He read that Aloan of the infirmary was a placed agent of Valeron's enemies, come to poison the royal blood, that she had been observed and taken, that she had confessed. He read it in the great rolling voice of his office, and I watched it land on the court, and I watched the court turn as one toward the plain gray woman behind my chair, and I watched 100 nobles' faces harden into the cheap and easy contempt of people who have just been handed permission to despise someone beneath them. This was the moment. In the other life, this was the moment I had looked at her like a snake in my bed and said 3 words. I rose from the throne. "Marshal," I said, "you have read that she confessed. Read us the confession." The marshal blinked. "Your Grace, the writ says only that a confession was." "Then there is no confession," I said. "Only a writ that claims one. Very well, a writ of treason. Sealed, I see, with the moon and thorn of my own house." I came down from the dais slowly, and the hall watched me the way a hall watches a drawn blade. "Bring it to me. I would look on the seal that condemns a woman in my hall." The marshal brought it. I took it, and I held it up so the candlelight fell across the wax, and I let the whole court see me look at it. And then, because a king unmasking a forgery must let others do the seeing, or it is only his word against hers, I did not name what I saw. I turned to the one man in the hall whom no one could accuse of serving me. "Lord Steward," I said, "you keep the register of the house's seals. Every device, every cipher, every private mark used in Valeron for 40 years you keep. Come. Look on this wax and tell the court, on your office and your honor, whose hands are on it." The Lord Steward was an old, dry, honest man who had served my grandmother longer than he had served me and owed me nothing and feared her more than he loved his own life. And that was exactly why I chose him, because if he named her, no one could say the king had put the words in his mouth. He came. He was afraid. I saw his hands tremble on the scroll. And I saw him find, beneath the great seal, half hidden in the wax, 3 thorns and a crescent. And I saw him understand what it was, and whose it was, and what it would cost him to say so with the Dowager Queen 10 feet away. And this is where a life turns on the smallest thing, because the old man's courage failed. I saw it fail. I saw his eyes flick to Maylies, and I saw him begin to say, "I cannot be certain, Your Grace," the soft lie that would have let the moment close and let her win, and left Aloan a hair's breadth from the gate. And Aloan, 3 steps behind the throne in her plain gray wool, set down her wine jug on the high table with a small deliberate click that carried in the silence, and spoke, a servant, speaking unbidden in the king's hall, which is itself near a crime, and said, clear and steady, into that vast held breath, 3 thorns and a crescent, the private cipher of the Dowager Queen. It is pressed beneath the great seal on that writ, my Lord Steward, and you have seen it 1,000 times, and so has half this hall, on her Grace's own letters. I am the woman it condemns, and I will not be condemned by a mark you are all too frightened to name, so I will name it. And I will say this also, and now she came around the throne to stand in the open, at my side unafraid, the way the dream had shown her once in a warmer hall, that I never confessed, because there is nothing to confess, because I am a healer's daughter and no more, and the writ that says otherwise was forged in this house, and I ask only that someone open the sealing desk in her Grace's solar, where the moon and thorn seal is kept locked, and count how many writs of this same clerk's hand lie half-finished in the drawer beneath it. The hall broke, because there were other writs. She had known there would be, she had lived it. She knew Maylies's habits. She knew the woman prepared her removals the way a general prepares a campaign, in advance in drafts. And while the feast assembled we had sent the one man Maylies did not own, the Lord Steward's own underclerk, to break the seal on that drawer with a warrant in my hand. And he stood now at the great doors with an armful of them, the half-drawn accusations of half a dozen inconvenient people, all in the same clerk's careful hand. All waiting for the day, their subjects became a stone in the horse's hoof. The underclerk carried them up the length of the hall in the terrible silence and laid them on the high table, and the Lord Steward, his courage found again now that he was not alone in it, now that a servant girl had gone first into the fire, put his old finger on the 3 thorns in the crescent and said, in a voice that shook but did not stop, "It is her Grace's private cipher. I would stake my life on it. It is on this writ and on these." And the court, which loved Maylies and feared me, looked at the drawer full of forged deaths, and understood at last which of us was the Winter. I turned to my grandmother. She had not moved. She sat straight-backed in her place, the Dowager Queen who had held Vale Run through 2 kings' deaths, and she looked at me, and she was not afraid, and she was not ashamed, and that was the most terrible thing of all, because even now, unmasked before the whole realm, she believed she had been right. "You are a boy," she said to me low, so that only the high table heard it. "You think this is mercy. It is weakness. I did what a crown requires and a king cannot stomach. I removed a threat to the blood. I would do it again. She is a healer's daughter with nothing behind her, and she has taken the throne's own eye. And one day when the north is burning because you would not bind Carth, you will remember that your grandmother tried to save you from your own soft heart, and no one came to stop her but a servant with a wine jug." "You are wrong," I said, and I said it so the hall could hear because she had earned that much, "about all of it, but you are most wrong about the last, because someone did come." I looked at Aloan, standing at my side in her gray wool with her chin up and the whole court's eyes on her. She came. She came for herself because you had taught her that no one else would. And I would rather have one woman who saves herself standing beside my throne than the whole eastern range bound to it in fear. I will not draw out the fall of Maylies. It was not a thing I took pleasure in, and pleasure is not what the moment held. The law did not permit me to spill my grandmother's blood, and I did not wish to. Whatever she had done in the iron belief that she was holding the realm together with her own 2 hands, and there is a kind of person for whom that belief is a prison no punishment can add to. I stripped her of the private seal and the sealing desk and the solar and the power she had held for 40 years, and I sent her to the old dower house in the western hills with servants enough for her dignity and none of the levers of court, and there she lived out her years, and I am told she never once said she was sorry, and I believe it, because she never once thought she had been wrong. That was her whole punishment, and it was complete, to be right, alone, in a stone house in the hills, while the realm she had guarded so ruthlessly went on perfectly well without her. Sabine of Carth left the next morning without a word, which was the most sensible thing she did at Vale Run. Her father's 4,000 spears did not march. A man does not go to war because a king declined to wed his daughter, and I bound the eastern range the following spring the way alliances ought to be bound, with fair trade and a shared road and a marriage among lesser houses that both sides actually wanted. The north did not burn. My grandmother had been wrong about that too. The map held. It always would have held. She had murdered a woman to solve a problem that trade and patience solved on their own. And Aloan did not fall into my arms when it was done. I want that understood, because it is the truest and most important thing in either of my lives, and if I told it any other way, I would be dishonoring her a 3rd time. When the hall had emptied and the guards had gone and the candles were burning low, she and I stood alone at the high table among the ruins of the feast, and I turned to her, and I did not know what I meant to say, some word of joy. I think, some claiming, some now it is over and you are safe and you are mine. And she saw it coming, and she stopped it gently with one raised hand. "No," she said, "not tonight, maybe not for a long time, do you understand?" "No," I admitted. "You did a great thing tonight, Alaric. You stood in the room. You did not say the 3 words. You let the old man's courage catch fire from a servant's, and you gave me the drawer, and you stood between me and the gate. I know what it cost you, and I do not make it small." She let out a breath. "But you did it in one night. And I died in the last one over the same 3 words, and I have carried it across the whole width of death, and I cannot lay it down as fast as you can pick it up. It is not a debt you settle by being good for one evening in a candle-lit hall. If you want me, and I think, God help us both, that you do, and that you always have in both lives, then you will have to earn it slowly, the way I lost my trust in you slowly over the whole of a life. You will have to let me watch you be the man from the gates opposite, day after ordinary day, in the dull, unwatched hours when there is no court to see you do it, until I believe it in my body and not just in my head. And you will have to bear that some days I will not believe it and let me not believe it and be there anyway. Can you do that? Not the grand thing, the long, dull, faithful thing." "Yes," I said, and for once in my life I did not say it as a king, closing a matter with a word. I said it as a man taking up a work I knew would be years long and knew I did not deserve the chance to begin. "Then that will do for tonight," she said. And she almost smiled, almost, and took up a guttering candle to light herself back to the infirmary, because she was still, that night, a healer's daughter with a ward to tend, and she would not let the ending of a dowager queen keep a fevered child waiting. I walked her down. Not to her door, she would not have that yet, and she was right, but to the foot of the infirmary stair, and there we parted, and I went up alone to a throne that felt, for the first time, like a thing I might one day be worthy to sit. I will tell you how it ended, because you have come this far, and the ending is the only part of either life I am proud of. It took 2 years. 2 years of the long, dull, faithful thing. I did not court her the way a king courts, no grand gifts, no public honors, nothing that would have made her a subject of the court's appetite. I earned her the way she had told me to, in the unwatched hours. I came to the infirmary in the gray mornings and let her set me to work rolling bandages and holding down thrashing patients, and I did the work, and I did not complain, and I did not once use it to close the distance she kept. I brought her the North's hardest cases, the wounded her skill could save and my kingdom's other healers could not, and I let her be the greatest healer in Vale Run in fact and in name, with no man's hand behind her, so that when at last she stood beside me it would be as a woman the realm needed, not a woman the king had lifted. I learned the shape of her silences. I learned which days the memory of the snow was on her, and on those days I did not press or plead or try to fix it. I only stayed near, doing something ordinary so that the plain fact of my nearness could do the slow work no words could do. Some days she still did not believe me. I let her not believe me. I was there anyway. And one winter evening in the 2nd year, the 2nd winter, the season of the gate, the season she had died in, the first hard frost sealed the pass, and I found her standing at the high infirmary window looking down at the winter gate in the falling snow, and her face was very still, and I knew where she was. I did not say anything wise. I had learned by then that there was nothing wise to say. I crossed the room and stood beside her at the window, close but not touching, and I looked with her at the iron gate and the falling white where she had once knelt, and waited for a man who did not come. And after a while she said without turning, "Walk me down." "To the gate. To the gate." So I took a lantern and walked her down through the sleeping court, out into the courtyard where the snow was coming, to the great barred winter gate. And she stood in front of it in the falling dark, in the exact place, I think, where she had knelt and died, and she looked at it for a long time. And I did not rush her, and I did not speak, and I did not reach for her. Then she turned around, so that her back was to the gate and her face was to me, and to the warm lit hall behind me, turned around, the thing the dream had never once let her do, and she looked at me, and the snow caught in her hair, and she said, "You came." "I'm sorry it took 2 years," I said. "No," she said, "you misunderstand. In the whole of the other life you never once turned around and found me looking at you. In the dream you told me I never turned. I only ever knelt with my back to you, waiting. Well," she lifted her chin and there were tears in her eyes, and she was not ashamed of them now. "I have turned around, and you are here. And I find that I believe it in my body, Alaric, not just my head. I find that I believe you would come. So," she held out her hand. "Take my hand, not before the court, not for the crown. Here at the gate in the snow, where no one is watching and it is only true. Take my hand and walk me back inside out of the cold, the way you did not once, and let that, not the throne, not the claiming, not any grand thing, let that be the whole of it." And I took her hand, at the winter gate, in the falling snow, with no one to see and nothing to gain, and 2 years of dull, faithful evenings behind it. And I walked her back inside out of the cold, into the warm and waiting hall. We were wed the following spring, and she was a Luna such as Veilrun had not seen, not the delicate ornament my grandmother had wanted for the throne, but a healer whose word carried weight in every pack in the north. A woman who had saved herself, and then saved half a kingdom's wounded, and never once let a soul forget that she had done both without waiting to be rescued. The court that had turned on her in the great hall on the night of the moon feast learned to bow to her, and did, and she accepted it with the dry patience of a woman who had once been invisible to them, and knew exactly what their reverence was worth. But that is not the ending I keep for myself. The one I keep is smaller, and it is ours, and I have never told it to the court. Every year on the night of the first hard frost, the night the gate seals, the night she died in the life I cannot fully remember and she can never fully forget, the two of us go down alone through the sleeping court with one lantern to the great winter gate, and she stands before it a while in the falling snow, and I stand beside her and do not speak. And then she turns around. Every year she turns around and finds me there, and she takes my hand, and I walk her back inside out of the cold. I do not know if I will ever remember the other life whole. I have made my peace with the not knowing, but I know this, in my body and not just my head, that a man is not the worst thing he ever did in a life he cannot recall. He is what he chooses in the long, dull, unwatched hours to do instead, and every winter at the gate that once killed her, I get to choose again. And every winter I turn out to be the man who came. She has never once had to kneel and wait for me since, and she never will again.